All right, good afternoon. It's 12:15. Before we get started, Trista has something to say, and she's right there.
Hi. So welcome to Education of 2020, first one, as a follow-up to our LEGO class that we all took when we were in Health, Wellness, and Safety Day. Just a couple of reminder things here. In your local areas, wherever you happen to be, please make sure that you send the information of who is in attendance to education@winmerelectric.com so that we can get those people recorded, everybody recorded who has been here. If you know people who are not attending, the class is being recorded so that people who, because it's a required class, that everybody can see that at this as well when they have a minute. Outside of that, please give Steve your attention and we will go from there.
Thanks, Trista. Just as a gentle reminder, if you're out on a remote site not here, please mute your iPads and such so we don't get background construction noise and other things. It'll be a much better experience for everybody. If you do have a question, obviously unmute your device and we can get going. Today we're here to talk about LEGO 2.0, but I would be remiss if I didn't say Skol Vikes. Vikings are in fact going to beat the San Francisco 49ers tomorrow, and we're going to be well on the way to a Super Bowl victory for the Minnesota Vikings. So just positive energy, let's go. If you're not a Minnesota Viking fan, you should rethink your fandom to whatever NFL team you currently think is better than the Vikings, because you're wrong. All right, so welcome to LEGO 2.0. During Health, Safety, and Wellness Days, we all had, or you all participated in some version of the LEGO exercise. It was very interesting because I did all three of them, and so I got to meet everybody in the company and watch how they unfolded, and they essentially all unfolded the same, which the exercise is designed to do that. So what we're going to do, because we were very rushed during Health, Safety, and Wellness Day, is we're going to talk about some of the waste that we saw during that and kind of why it was there, and then what we did to fix it. So when you go back to your workplaces, you can say, okay, I learned that in the LEGO exercise. How can I get rid of that waste where I'm at? All right, so welcome to LEGO 2.0. We're going to talk about a couple of different things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to recap each round. There were 4 rounds in the LEGO exercise, if you remember correctly. I know some of you were stretching your brains all the way back to October, but that will be okay because you're all very intelligent beings, right? So we're going to talk about the waste associated with each round, and then we're going to talk about the corrections we made to eliminate the waste, so you can kind of see the correlation between the waste and what we did, just to try to connect some dots for you. All right, so round 1. This was a 4-round exercise, remember? So round 1, we came in and you sat down in a team of 6. And just to recap the LEGO exercise, sat down a team of 6, you had some material in front of you, and round 1, though, it was way off in the distance. All right, your material was way off. You averaged about 3 planes apiece. You averaged that plane in about 5 minutes and 23 seconds. You had a little bit of rework, you had a lot of scrap, and a lot of whip. And for whip going forward, whip is work in progress. That's work that's sitting in front of you that isn't done yet whenever we call time. So whip is generally bad. You want to keep that down. But we were simulating in round 1 a traditional plant layout. Traditional plant layout is a plant or a company that's grown over time. Doesn't necessarily make sense. It made sense as they were growing, but as you look at where we got to, it doesn't make sense. I look at our prefab shops as a good example of a traditional layout. Back what they were years ago, and by years ago I mean 8-10 years ago, they were all cluttered. They didn't make much sense. Material didn't make any sense. There was no flow through them. So that was what round 1 looked like. So what happened? We had a traditional layout. It was nonlinear. That means, if you remember, you had to get up and you had to walk around and hand your airplanes off to the next person. You couldn't necessarily pass them to the person because they weren't sitting next to you. Material was not located nearby. I placed it in the room as far away from you as possible, so you had to physically get up out of your chair and go get it. The only person that could quality control an airplane during round 1 was Station 5, the person with the little tool to quality control the aircraft. And if he found a mistake, he couldn't tell anybody about it. He could say there's a mistake, but he couldn't tell anybody about it to fix it. But nobody else, even if they found a mistake, they had to keep building on the aircraft. What's that? It's not? Okay, is the PowerPoint sharing in the field? Because we test drove this before the thing started.
Yes, we see it.
Okay. All right. All right. And then we also had very large batch sizes. We were building airplanes in batch sizes of 5. That was creating a lot of issue. Going back to the quality control issue, I think initially we had several stations throughout the company where they were built wrong right from the beginning, and they made it all the way through to the end, and then the whole batch got turned upside down. It was kind of funny. At the time, it was real life. It would have been not funny at all. So large batch sizes and with potential large quality problems. So these are the ways that we identified in round 1. All right, waiting. There was lots of people sitting around waiting for something to do. If you're in stations 3, 4, 5, or 6, I think one of the first things I probably said to you is, why am I paying you to sit here? Does anybody remember me saying something like that? I'm pretty sure I said it in every round, and I did 12 rounds of this exercise. So a lot of waiting around, a lot of people sitting around waiting for that large batch size to come through. There was the waste of transportation. Transportation in this case was simulated by you getting up and having to walk back and fill your material bin and come back. That's a transportation waste, moving material from place to place. And then motion, you also had to get up and walk around the table because we were nonlinear. You had to get up, walk around. You couldn't pass the material across the table. So that was the simulated waste of motion. And then overproduction, we had large batch sizes, so we were producing way more airplanes than we needed or that we could deliver at any given time. We had unused employee potential because there was only one quality control. We had a huge rework of defects. We had large amounts of scrap. What the simulation there was, at the 2-minute or at the 4-minute mark or the 2-minute mark, we would say, okay, guess what? We got a problem with the quality of the material. There's a defect in the material. Everything you've made in stations 1 and 2 is gone. So that's reworking of defects. Huge quantities of that. And then we had high inventory because we had high work in progress. So of the 8 ways, we identified 7 of them in the first round. The only one that, it's a little bit harder to tie to is over processing. I should have asked that as a question. Who could name this one that wasn't there? But it's over processing. What were we doing more of to get these SAMR airplanes out that we didn't need to do? And that one's a little bit hard to identify. So those are the ways. Let me go back for a second. So you can see round 1 was full of waste. We made some airplanes. We made them in a decent amount of time. But we had high waste. We had high inventory. We had large overproduction. So that was bad, right? So what do? We went to round 2. Round 2, your planes went up. You made about 7 airplanes apiece. All right. Your time went down. So you're making more airplanes in fewer time. Your rework went up on an average, but only by 1. That's a normal variance. However, your scrap went up and your work in progress went up. Well, why did that happen? Why are we making more airplanes in less time, but our scrap and our work in progress went up? Does anybody have a guess on why that happened? Mueller? Anybody?
Is that the one you changed the material?
We brought the material closer. That's 100% correct. We did 2 things, actually. We brought the material closer, and we changed it so you didn't have to get out of your chair anymore. And we turned you into a cellular layout. Now, a cellular layout is a linear production line where you moved from round 1 or station 1 to station 6 right around the table. Nobody had to get up. We moved the material right to the table. So what happens but we didn't change batch size. So we still had people waiting around, right? The quality control is still the only person that can do quality control, but we still had a lot of waiting, and we still had other things going on. But station 1 and station 2, particularly station 1, was cranking out airplane bodies like nobody's business. I think in one of the rounds, station 1 practically went through every one of the Legos that we have, just cranking airplanes out, cranking them out, cranking them out, cranking them out. That's because we moved everything closer. So what happens then, just like Greg said, is your scrap goes up and your work in process goes up because station 1 doesn't have to go anywhere every couple of minutes to get material. Everything is right there. So what happened with our waste then? Okay. Well, we eliminated the transportation waste. We eliminated the waiting time, or actually the waiting time was still high for most, right? Because we still had a blockage at Station 2. Station 2 was still doing a lot of work. So the waiting time was still high. But then we eliminated the motion. So now we've eliminated 2 of the wastes essentially completely, motion and transportation. But because we didn't change anything that anybody actually does, we drove some of the waste actually higher. So overproduction was still high. Matter of fact, it was higher than it was in the first round. Unused employee potential is still present, right? Because everybody is still locked into doing that same thing that they were set to do from the very beginning, right? We didn't change anything. There's still only that one quality control person. And then rework of defects and inventory were way up because production was up at Station 1 and 2. We did create a few more planes, but the inventory and the rework of defects all happened in the first 2 stations because they're just cranking stuff out like crazy, or Station 1 is, right? And it's just all piling up. So that was round 2. This class is going to go really fast. Okay. So what happened in round 3? What did we do?
Batch. With batch setups.
Larry said batch. We did that in round 2.
2.
Yep, we created a linear in 2. In round 3, okay. In round 3, we introduced the Kanban system, essentially, right? We introduced one-piece pull, all right? I asked everybody in the company if they've seen a Kanban card. I got some positive results and some negative results. But essentially what we did is we introduced the pull system. And a pull system is designed, when I said, okay, you can build a batch size of, you can build 1 airplane, but you can't push it forward until the inbox in front of you is empty. All right? So what happened then was, it's a pull system. So the pull is the empty inbox. It's pulling the aircraft forward. We're not just shoving the aircraft forward like we were in the first 2 rounds. Make them as long as you can and just keep shoving forward. We don't care what happens downstream. In this case, it's pulling from downstream as the empty queue pulls the next aircraft forward. So what happened? The number of airplanes went up. The time, look what happened to the time. We cut our time by 75% just by changing the batch size and creating the pull system. Rework was essentially the same, but look what happens to scrap and whip. Our scrap is way down and our whip is way down because we went from a batch of 5 and a pull system to a batch of 1, and it just pulled it forward. So what happened? We introduced the pull system, which is Kanban, right? We went to a small batch size, and the quality control people were able to vocalize quality, or everybody's able to vocalize quality problems. If you found a problem, you could actually tell somebody about it. All right. The prior 2 rounds, you couldn't tell anybody about it, but now we're starting to eliminate some of that unused employee potential, right? Everybody knew how to build the airplane. Everybody could look at it. We can see that. So let's let people actually say how to do that. All right. So what happened in round 3? Waiting time was drastically reduced, but it was still present. Right? We still had waiting time because the line would kind of jump forward in jerks, right? Because the line wasn't level. We hadn't figured that out yet. All right. Overproduction was dramatically reduced because we went from a batch size of 5 to 1. Some employee potential being used because we were able to vocalize quality problems. Inventory was way down, right? You go back and you look at the WIP and the work in progress, that drives the need for massive amounts of inventory down, which from a LUMA Electric standpoint, that frees up cash. It frees up lots of things. We're not stumbling over it. We're not moving it. It doesn't become obsolete. So inventory was way down. And we were able to change with customer demands more rapidly with less waste, right? Remember at the 4-minute mark, or the 2-minute mark, whatever it was, we said it wasn't a material defect this time. The customer changed the spec on us. So we're able to retool, refit rapidly, with minimal waste, so because we didn't have all this extra production, right? So we become more agile, more nimble, and be able to respond to things. And if you think about that from a construction standpoint, what happens is does the owner ever change their mind? Of course they do, right? They change their minds all the time. We have change orders all the time, right? So if we build all this stuff right away when we don't need it right away, we risk having the owner change their mind and then having to go back and rework it. A good example is a job we did not that long ago where we went from 4 square to 4 and 11 16-inch boxes. You know, if we had built all of our prefab months and months in advance, we would have had a problem because we had to go back and refit all of those boxes. So, all right, round 4. Again, production goes back up or goes up more. Production time goes down. Rework is about the same, and scrap and WIP are about the same. Scrap and WIP, if we were doing it right, that's all the higher those numbers could ever be, is 2 and 6. Because we were counting, what was it, 1, the Q and 1, or the Q and 2 and 2. So if we were doing it right, that's all it could ever be. So, but what changed? Why did we increase our airplane production by 50%? Why did we take 10% or 15% off of our production time? What do we do?
Everybody QC on that one.
Everybody QC'd. The other thing we did is, remember,
Evenly distributed the amount of work.
we evenly distributed the amount of work. That's exactly right. We had a flexible, balanced workforce. Because even when we went to one-piece flow in a pull system in round 3, we still had an unbalanced line. There was still waiting time in the line. It was the guy that had to do 6 pieces in station 2. It was the guy that had to do 4 pieces in station 4, or vice versa, or whatever they were. But that's where the choke points were at. We're at 2 and 4. Okay. So what we did is we balanced the line out. We even added an installation task for station 5, who was just the quality control person. Well, all of a sudden now they can install something and quality control. That's easy. All right. We kept the small batch size, and we said anybody can fix a defect. So you can smash the pieces together, you can take it apart, you can move it around, you can do whatever, and everybody can do it. So what do? We maximize use of employee potential. Everybody can do everything. All right. That's the maximum employee potential we could have had in this scenario. Waiting time was reduced even further because we leveled the line out completely. Inventory and overproduction remained constant, and that's because of the nature of the way we set it up, right? The pull system said there's only a certain amount of inventory and overproduction that can happen at any given time if you're following the rules of the pull system. If you think about our Kanban system, there's only a certain amount of clamshell materials that you can have on your job site if you're following the rules of the Kanban system, or cleaning supplies or pens or paper or whatever. There's only a maximum amount you can have, and that's what this scenario is set up for. Okay, so that's where we're at. So let's look at how this thing changed from beginning to end. The planes, we increased production by 733% by looking at the waste and just making some changes to the way we did production. We decreased our production time by 83%. So think about that. We raised production by 733% on average, and we reduced the production time to make those airplanes by 83%. That's pretty good. All right. There really was no change in rework because it's just the way the scenario was set up. However, we reduced scrap by 87%. If we could get an 87% reduction in scrap in this company, that would be fantastic. And we reduced work in progress by 67%, again, because of the nature of how we set the system in place. We can do those same things here at Wilmer Electric by ordering prefab when we need it, by not ordering 5,000 pieces of prefab at one time, maybe ordering, just little bits and let it come to your job site when you need it. So we can do those things. All right, so there's the summary. By eliminating the waste involved in production, we increased production by 733%, reduced production time by 83%, reduced scrap by 87%, reduced work in progress by 67%, Eliminating waste is in fact good for everybody. What questions do you have related to the Lego exercise? Somebody's got to have a question. I just talked for 20 minutes straight. Somebody has to have a question.
Where did you get the information to do this exercise? Did you create it?
The statistics or?
The whole Lego exercise.
Oh, that's a good question. Where do we get the training kit? That training kit was inherited from Sam Chapin 11 and a half years ago when I started at Wilmer Electric. I don't know where he got it, but that that exercise it has a VHS tape in the box, if that tells you how old it is. But the information is still relevant. That's what I like about it. It's still relevant to everything that we do. And I think since we really went to lean construction, it's more relevant now than it has ever been. And I've taught this Lego exercise now for the better part of 10 years. And this last time was the most engaged I have seen anybody, because people were recognizing during the course of the thing, hey, this doesn't make any sense. Why is the material way over there? Why are we not set up the way we are? So I think recognizing the waste is starting to take hold. But I had to be the bad guy and say, yeah, everything's out there for a reason. Don't think right now, don't do that. But overall, I think I was really pleased with the recognition of the waste throughout the course of the exercise. Anybody else have any questions? Jay?
Do you think there's still room for improvement, Steve? Is there still things that could we have done things actually even faster? Is there a better number there?
Yeah, we've tried that. I think there is. I think there's obviously always room for improvement. The more a team works together, the better they're going to be. The more familiar you get with the task, the better you're going to be. You're just going to create some natural repetitive efficiencies. We didn't have time during health, safety, and wellness days, but there is a fifth round that we've tried where a single person builds an airplane to see if that creates more. I'm not 100% convinced that it does, but we have tried it, and I honestly don't remember what the results were. Yeah.
So how would you correlate that? Like, if somebody's building this in their own, like, just do it start to finish
Yep.
on one assembly?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, Al just
like knockouts in 50 boxes.
Al just asked, how do you correlate this to prefab? And he said, does one person build the entire assembly on their own, or do they go through and knock out 50 boxes and then go through and put connectors on and then go through and do this? That'd be an interesting exercise to try, actually, with real life electrical material. But the reality is you should probably do it one at a time, one complete assembly at a time.
One assembly at a time gives you less defects too.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear. Al is of the opinion, and he's probably right, that building one assembly at a time results in less defects. And I think he's probably correct.
Steve.
Steve?
Oh, good.
Steve?
Yeah.
Well, Dave Chapin, when I've run it before and you do the fifth round and 6 people sit around and build them individually, the production just absolutely shatters the round 4 one.
So six people building entire airplanes by themselves.
Right, on their own.
All right.
Scratch. It just goes up. It's another round that adds on just like the other thing.
Misty, were you going to say the same thing?
That's what I was going to say. The one-piece flow will be proven time and time again to be faster than the assembly approach. So I've done the exercises too, both ways, and you are correct. And Alan's comment about prefab with the defects and stuff is, if you take that in the Lego exercise, that's the same application applies there. You have less defects.
So build the whole airplane at once with one person?
Yes.
It's hard because in the assembly line, it's hard to balance out all of the steps to be exactly the same. One person.
I think we just lost voice on Lincoln.
I would think there'd be place for a batch, maybe a small batch. Like if you're gonna have 2 boxes, knock out, so knock out in there, 2 down, and get this, not go boom, 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 connectors in. There might be an optimum batch size for certain tasks,
You think there's a sweet spot somewhere?
right?
Can't hear Greg. Greg thinks there may be a sweet spot somewhere for batch size, whether it may be more than one, but less than 50, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so less than 100.
Depends on how many you need and finished product at that time.
Yep. Okay.
And the less times you pick that box up. So,
Fair enough.
I think back when we were talking about one piece flow quite a while ago, you make one, set it down, make another one, set it down, and you've got to pick that up again over here. You got to pick the same piece up, otherwise you just, and I think that was one of the reasons why one piece flow is better.
So you don't keep handling
Yeah.
the same box over and over and over again. That's why I like our box bracket assembly thing in the prefab shop. You put it in, you don't touch it. Everything else goes around it. So
and that may change the batch size, make the batch not as effective
sure.
if you got the right pieces to do the work with.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, what was brought up here is, let's say batch size, if you got one tool in your hand, use that tool to do that task for, let's say, whatever, how many it is. Then, because you'll need another tool to say, let's say boxes, you're knocking out the KO, you pick up that tool, you're picking it up, let's say you're doing 10 boxes at a time, you're picking up 10 separate times. If you just pick that tool up, do all 10, drop it down, and you pick another tool, tighten the connector, instead of picking it up and down that same tool 10 different times how many tools you need to do the task.
That's an interesting point, Jason. With the Lego exercise, there's no tools involved necessarily, but in some of the work that we do, there are tools involved, and that creates excess motion, right?
Right.
So I think that might be an interesting experiment to try, which one really is faster from a box assembly or whatever standpoint.
That's for your bracket.
But what got cut off on me before when I was talking, when multiple people are working, somebody always holds somebody else up. Two people you can't balance the workout perfectly. So if we're out chopping wood and I'm hauling the wood and you're chopping it, it's impossible to make it so that they're equal tasks. So you'll either chop faster than I can haul it, or I will haul it faster than you can chop, and one of those two people. So, yes, there is a little bit to the whole tool thing. And with the Lego exercise, and when you're building something, of the 6 people, none of us will build the same amount of planes. None of us will mount the same number of brackets in the same amount of time. But as a group, we will maximize our effort if we all do the entire task start to finish.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Dave. I think what they're talking about is that should I build 5 at a time? Like if I have 5 tasks, should I do task 1, all 5, and then task 2 on all 5, and task 3 on all 5 within the same individual person? But that's what you guys are talking about, right? Yeah. So.
It'd be interesting on that too. You could do an activity or test to see versus having to handle a different tool each time, or how many times you have to adjust the thing you're building or set it down to get the next tool, and which one is actually has less time.
Yeah. You could do it a couple different ways, do it all at once and then try it,
I think
it'd be an interesting experiment. Give it a shot, see what happens.
Like when you do a bunch at a time,
And it's forever home? Are you adopting it?
Our toast is forever
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to verify where I sent a CE credit. I didn't hear Trista. I was.
Education at wilmerelectric.com.
I knew you knew the answer.
Whatever, it was helped.
Yeah, Trista told me. I'll credit where credit's due. All right, if you don't have any more questions, 30 minutes seems like a nice round number. Thanks for coming. Skol Vikes.